So these were my 2 cents about prop types. What about pure components and should component update? We're not using that in the application. Now let's analyze the application. Do we have any state or prop changes which trigger a re-rendering even though this might not be required? If we have a look at the running application, most clicks and things we do really change the UI and therefore should trigger updates, should trigger re-renderings of these components. So we shouldn't really lose performance there. And using a lot of pure components for unnecessary should component update checks might even hit the performance more than doing an occasional unnecessary re-rendering. Crucial points we should check are, of course, our burger builder container. There we change the state, but whenever we do change the state, it really affects our application and we do need to re-render stuff. I can identify one element here though, where we might be able to save some performance by not re-rendering it unnecessarily, and that is the modal component. It wraps the order summary, and that of course means that whenever ingredients or the price changes, since these are props of order summary will be re-rendered. However, if the modal is not visible, we don't need to do that. So actually, only if the modal is shown, re-rendering of that wrapped element here makes sense. So that is something we might wanna check and control. So let's first of all find out when order summary is re-rendered by simply adding a lifecycle hook to it. So I'll go to order summary, and currently this is of course a functional component. Let's turn it into a class component so that we can add lifecycle hooks so that we can see when this is updated. So let's extend the component object, which we of course now need to import from React. And in there, as you learned it, we need to have a render method where we need to return our JSX code. So basically this code here. Now we also have some adjustments here, the ingredient summary we calculate. So let's do that prior to returning the JSX code, but inside the render method. And now we can get rid of that stuff down there, and we need to adjust the exported name. And props now always are this props, as you learned. That's the case in class-based components. So with that, what else is missing? Here we got also props, so that should be this props here too. Now if that's saved, it should work again. Should be working fine. Let's now implement a method to see when this actually updates. I'll add component will update here. Now, if that fails for you because your React version maybe doesn't support it anymore, well, you can also simply use component did update. In the end, I just want to highlight here that we're in the updating process. It doesn't have to be component will update, and we'll not use this hook here for anything important. So definitely no need to implement component will update here. Component did update will do. And I simply want to console log order summary will update. Now let's see when this updates. If we reload the application and I add an ingredient, you see order summary will update even though we're not showing it. So it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to re-render that. Now let's see if that changes if we make sure that modal doesn't update unnecessarily. Now for that, let's head over to the modal.js file. And let's also turn modal into a class so that we can implement should component update. Alternatively, of course, you could keep this as a functional component and wrap the exported component, so the modal constant you're exporting, with React memo. This would be an alternative to using should component update. Both works and both will effectively have the same impact and effect here. So modal will therefore also extend component. Let's import component from React then and export the renamed modal. And of course also now make sure to implement the class body with a render method where we now return our JSX code like this here and get rid of the stuff down there which we don't need anymore, And as always, make sure that props become this props. So now the modal is working again. And let's now see if we can control the updating of order summary, which is wrapped by the modal, by changing the way the modal itself updates. So let's simply add should component update to the modal, and we'll get the next props and next state here as arguments. So now I want to check, or now I might want to make sure that this only updates if show changes, because that's the only thing which matters for me here. So if next props show, if that is unequal to this props show, so to the previous state, then I want to return true. Or we can of course simply shorten this and simply return the result of this check. So that is what I want to do here. Let's now also implement component will update here to confirm if this works. So I will simply console log modal will update and save this component now. Now let's see. If I now reload the page and I start adding elements, we see order summary is not calling will update anymore. If I click order now modal will update is called and order summary will update is called. So here we definitely improved our application because we make sure that we don't unnecessarily update order summary, that we don't unnecessarily re-render that. And you also see that the wrapping element controls the updating of the wrapped element. So order summary, theoretically, the component, is included in the burger builder, but it is not updated because the wrapping element modal has a should component update method where we control this. Now, our code here is pretty lean in the modal, and what we don't do, we don't react to changes in the clicked listener. So if the modal closed property would change, we're not checking this. So we only return true if show changed. It's okay here in this application because we actually never reassign this clicked listener. If we were to do that, or if we were to also change state in the modal, we definitely should also check for changes in other props and other state properties, or simply extend pure component. Here I'm not using pure component because pure component would run more checks than I want to do. Pure component would also check for modal closed to be changed. And I'm not interested in that, so my method should be even more straightforward, even more focused. Now with that, we can of course also turn our order summary back into a functional component to no longer output component will update here, but I'll leave it in here for debugging purposes, for reference. But I will comment that this could be a functional component, doesn't have to be a class. And of course, component will update is not required. Should component update is definitely not required here because we don't need to check this. This always needs to be updated if the modal is shown, and the modal is where we do check whether it needs to be updated or not. So this is one improvement we can add to this application.